Welcome to Miss Win Checking In, the space where creativity meets healing. Here, we explore the path of mindful expression through the lens of writing, wellness, and soulful storytelling. Take a moment to pause and ask yourself, how are you feeling right now? If you're watching this on YouTube, drop an emoji in the comments to represent how you're feeling. And then let's check in at the end. Let's take a deep breath, tune in, and prepare to create from within. Hey, it's Miss Win checking in, and I am back with another meaningful episode. Today, I'm so grateful to have a Rashad Young joining us. What's up, Rashad? How's it going?
I'm good. How are you doing? Appreciate you for having me.
Yeah, I'm doing fabulous. I'm so excited. Today, we're talking creativity and emotional stability. What do you know about these topics?
Yeah, I know a lot. So honestly, it's a little weird. So a little bit about me. I'm an author by one of my trades, but also I do podcasts. I have a podcast called Knowing is Knowing. So I'm always interviewing people. So to be interviewed is a little more on the unique side of things. Born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. Uh, by day, I'm a high school counselor and also a therapist in training. So the next steps is to be a therapist one day. So I think it's really cool to kind of see all these things kind of come together from writing perspective, though. I wasn't always the best writer growing up. It was one of those things where I utilized it the older I gotten. It kind of started in college where just kind of going through a form of depression, I realized that writing was like a creative outlet. And kind of utilizing that outlet, I started recognizing like, oh, okay, you're kind of good at this. And you know that academic writing is different than different forms of writing where you can kind of be more creative and expressive. You don't have to be as formal. So I think that is why I think it's so useful to the creativity and the emotional support side of things. And so I'm excited to talk more about that today.
Nice. Okay. So let's just jump right into some of these questions then. Tell me, how has your creative practice then influenced your emotional stability? Like, let's go ahead and make that connection.
It's a good question. How's my creative practice
Hmm.
connect with emotional stability? Really, from the writing perspective, it's kind of been a tool per se. I feel like I realize that I'm really expressive when my emotions are a bit discombobulated. I feel like I'm really expressive in those states of mind. So I try my best to put these things together to recognize the beauty of the emotions that we have in life and to experience those things and to use the creativity side of it to express myself in the best way possible. So really when those moments are dark and are tough, I do find myself to be more creative, but also I find the beauty in those things and just recognize that, when I talk to people, when I talk to my students or clients as well, journaling is something that while I might not be the number one person to use it, I also think for people who may just need find different tools to kind of write on things, some people that have used it, they have found the beauty in that as well. So I think there's a beauty in the creativity and and expressing yourself through writing to kind of formulate and support yourself emotionally.
Yeah. What just came to mind is because, and this is I've been talking about this for a while now, and this question just popped up in my head because I'm thinking, when I'm in the middle of crying, I don't have a journal out. I'm not trying to write down Nathan. I'm not trying to
Right.
write. I'm not trying to create. Like, how does someone get to, like, where does the writing come in at? Like, let's say something just popped off. I'm emotional. I'm my first instinct might not be to write. Like, where would that come in? I guess just in the flow of emotions, maybe for you, or just from what you know about from your work as a therapist and counselor and things like that. Like, where does that
Yeah.
even come in
So
at?
Yeah, so obviously the intensity part. So I think in the middle of a breakdown, that probably won't necessarily work out. But I think when you take the time to really like sit with things, especially if you have a lot on your mind, I think that's when it usually comes the
Mhm.
best with me is when I have a lot going on, when I have all these different things. It's just doing it. I don't really think there's a structure, at least not for me. I'm learning more. I'm an abstract thinking guy where I just have these different concepts and I just try to put it together. So if you are looking for more of a structure for somebody who may need a way to use it as an emotional, support tool, really just maybe think of a different prompt or like using a prompt to kind of help them kind of start things like with pen and paper or a computer and a blank screen. It's just really just typing the first things that kind of come to your mind, and then try to formulate something that comes from that after that. So that's how I usually do it. Obviously, the intensity of things is usually not when it's going to be able to be expressed the best. When you have some time to kind of sit and reflect after you have maybe an emotional breakdown or something like that, is when it's probably best to use it. At least in my experience.
Yeah, no, that's good. That I think that while you were talking, that was coming to mind as well. You kind of sit and reflect afterwards, maybe not
Yeah.
in during the emotional breakdown, or like in the middle of being, it could also be on the other side, in the middle of just being so excited and just full of joy. Your first instinct might not be to sit and reflect on this moment, but maybe afterwards. And so, okay, absolutely. Well, can you share, I guess, a specific instance when you were engaging in creative work that significantly impacted your emotional well-being?
Yeah, my first book actually. My first book is titled Be Formless. I wrote that in 2018. What is it, 2025? Lord, time has passed. So I was fresh out of college, where trying to figure things out. Like most college kids, you don't necessarily know what you're going to do next. Some people have plans, some people don't. And for me, I entered a very interesting space where, again, I think I was kind of introduced to the world of depression. Like I knew about it, but I think to actually experience it in real time, that is when I realized that, okay, you have all these different emotions. You're anxious. You're trying to figure these things out. And again, I just started to write. And as I started to write more and more, and I was spending hours because I had nothing else better to do. I'm like, okay, there's something here, and you can utilize this to kind of tell a story for those who may be in the same space. And I think I try to utilize that in my writing when I do write. It's always be reflective, because I think sometimes when you see authors, especially like real successful ones like New York Times bestsellers, they're like, oh, here's 10 steps on how to be happier or more successful. And I think sometimes it's hard for people to resonate with that because they may not be in that same place as that person. Also, on the other end, too, everybody who are big time sellers are not necessarily writing those things on a day by day. They may have writers helping them out. So I try to be authentic with the things that I'm saying based off where I'm at, to kind of tell people, like, I'm probably in the same space as you, and these are my thoughts on this, and this is how we can kind of collaborate together on figuring those things out. So I definitely would say my first book for sure was like the first instance of utilizing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think that writing is more therapeutic than other creative activities for you? And then if so, why or why not?
For me, yes. I
Mm-hmm.
think there's so many other things that we can do to be creative. Singing, instruments, but for me, writing typically, just because it's for me, it's how I just operate the best. When I have all these thoughts, the best way to do is to kind of just write them out, and kind of put it together. So another thing outside of just like writing, like self-development stuff, is kind of exploring the poetry and just kind of just putting things together. I think that's when I really utilize the abstract part of my brain and the emotional piece. Like I could be feeling something and just try to use that as like a topic, just kind of like curate a story behind it. It can be based off of my own experience. It can be based off of something that I've seen, but it's just something that I recognize is a way for me to kind of feel better about myself when it's all said and done. Like after I finish, I'm like, it may not come out at all ever.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a collection of those things, but it's like, it's really good to kind of sit back and think of like, okay, at this moment I was upset and I wrote this, and when I was happy, I wrote this, and to kind of see all those things kind of combine to see like how my mind navigates through those things.
Yeah. Good. Good. Um, so I guess my next question, you've been giving some straight, clear answers. I'm like, okay, shoot. All right, let's continue. No, because it's good. Shoot, I'm not complaining. So then what about just like, would you say that there are times where you're like so creative where you just maybe like don't rest, or how do you balance your creativity, I guess, with your need for emotional rest and recovery, or is that a thing?
That's tough because I think
Mhm.
right now I'm in writer's block, so
Okay.
it's a little unique. So what I've learned with writer's block, at least, is just to embrace it. And I think for me, sometimes that's a reminder to try to be present. It's definitely not something that I consider and say I'm a guru at or a pro at, but from a
Mhm.
writing piece, it's just really just paying more attention to a lot more stuff, being more observing. But when I do catch that creative pocket, it is a pocket and it is very kind of restless and relentless. Where I know I probably got like a good 2, 3 weeks in me where I can just try to get as much as I can out. And then try
Mhm.
to go back and then be present again. So I think with that, I think it just depends on the person, but it's not a I don't think it's a right or wrong way. I think it's similar to painters. You kind of respect the art form for what it is. 'Cause I used to be really upset when I used to have writer's block. I'm like, man, I feel like I should be knocking this out and kind of competing with an invisible goalpost that I shouldn't have been doing. Because art is something that's just supposed to be expressed and experienced instead of just trying to put something out. And it has to be meaningful, at least for me. So no, it's kind of a mix of both. So yeah, when I'm creative, yes, but when I'm not in a good space or in a writer's block space, I just kind of embrace it and just accept it.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I think what you said right there, shoot, you might have set some authors and writers free. No, especially for the people. Well, how do I overcome writer's block? Maybe you just embrace it. Maybe it's not something that is meant to be overcome. Maybe the creative juices will start flowing just like you said, out of nowhere. I know for
Mm,
me, that's been something that I've been struggling with is like, dang, I want to create content. I want to get on Instagram. That used to be like something that I was
yeah.
doing all the time. What?
Mm.
I took a break from Instagram last year in August. Have not really been posting much on there. I'm
Yeah.
on threads every now and then, dropping stuff or whatever. I'm on my blog, kind of, and I'm just like, dang, I want to get back to my normal stuff, but it's like I haven't been feeling it. I've
And
not
yeah,
been feeling it.
it's really just honoring it. I think even taking a step further, content is the biggest thing too as well. I definitely a stickler for, pushing and trying to make content a thing. But there's also points where, yeah, you just may not be feeling it. And again, it's just really asking yourself, what is your ultimate goal with doing that? Because at the end of the day, you can drop 50 amazing videos and get no traction, then you feel discouraged. So I'm
Yeah.
starting to learn that the quality of the content is more important than the actual, frequency, how much that you drop. Because everybody kind of gives you tips on, oh, you should be
Mhm.
dropping 3 or 5 times a day, and it's not really realistic, especially if you are somebody that has to utilize creativity. Um, as kind of like your guiding post. That's the easiest way to be burnt out, and that's from firsthand experience. So yeah, you
Mhm.
got to find stuff that's meaningful and just understand that it's a definitely a process. It takes people years before they really hit their pocket. So
Yeah.
just keep that in mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's true. But I want to say on the flip side, man, I've been writing books up the yin yang. I'm like, maybe this is where this is where
Yeah,
my energy has shifted. I'm working on this podcast one, which takes a lot of time.
it
I'm also
does.
working on client projects, which that takes a lot of time. So I've been checking
Yeah.
in every now and then, like, yo, y'all keep sending me client projects to work on. So when I get done with this, when I get done with the podcast, maybe I'll be back. When I get done writing books, maybe I'll be back. And that's just kind of, like you said, just coming to accept it. And just knowing, hey, as people, we only have so much time. I had to come to the conclusion of that. I can't, I had this idea of myself as we're unlimited. I'm like, girl, we're unlimited. We could do all the things. What? We
Yeah.
can't do all the things. And it was like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, that's
I
just
used to
what
think
it
the same
was.
way. I used to think
Mhm.
the same way, and I often goes back to a book I read a couple years ago, but I go back to it when I need to. It's called The One Thing. It's by Gary
Okay.
Keller, and it pretty much breaks down like different myths that we try to think about what we can do. Like the idea of being a multitasker is really is it's not realistic at all because it's
Mhm.
very hard to be present and doing a whole bunch of things at the same time. Our brains just aren't wired like that. Uh, and if it's so, it's for a short amount of time. And so when you're doing something like you mentioned, trying to do this and then do creative projects and write, something's going to give. And usually it's the thing that probably requires the most thinking power, which I would assume at this point is writing or making content. Like you can probably do the
Yeah.
podcast, but then the next thing you don't want to do is put it out there and market
Right.
it because that just requires a lot of time and energy. So it's just again just recognizing what all we can do. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something I want to say. A couple months ago, I was talking with a friend about that. We were gonna be each other's accountability partners on goals and stuff. And I had all these different goals, and we were gonna check in every week. And I was not meeting my goals weekly. And it turns out, like, actually, I need more time. Like, my goals that I was setting actually need more time than a week. And she was like, well, maybe break them down into baby steps. And it's like, I wasn't thinking like that, you know. In some cases, I can be very structured, like, okay, bing, bang, boom, I got the steps. I know, take baby steps with this. And then some cases, it's like, I'm all over the place, but the goal's getting met. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, okay, and that's just what it would be. And anyways, we're no longer friends anymore because how can I hold her accountable when I'm not meeting my own goals? And I'm like, well, to you, it just looks like I'm not meeting my goals, but I'm doing the dang thing. Like, okay,
Yeah.
it's taken me longer than a week. And so it was
Yeah.
like, okay, I have to be realistic here that my goals are going to take me longer than a week. Sometimes it would take me 3 weeks. Sometimes it would take me 8 weeks. It would just
Yeah.
take more time. And
Yeah.
I said, you know what? I have to give myself that time. And I value being connected to people who are flexible. Like being so rigid over things can become a stressor that can, just really become a block to our creativity. Like, have you ever
Right.
had that experience where it's like, dang, you're trying to meet a deadline and just you don't make it because you're stressed out over meeting the deadline?
Yeah, a lot of the deadlines I've set, especially from a creative aspect, is self. It's not like it'd be different. It was like a
Yeah.
publishing company deal, and I'm trying to put out a book. Fortunately, right now I'm still in the independent space, but one day that I'm sure that will happen where there's a deadline I have to meet.
Mm-hmm.
I think yeah, you just have to be flexible with your goals in mind, because you recognize usually there's a beauty behind it when you give it some more time anyway. Because again, it's you're asking yourself, if you hit this deadline, okay, what is the overall outcome of that? So I mean, I can yeah, candidly, like when I published both books, I I thought I'd be very excited. I was at that point, I was just so happy to be done. That I don't really think I got a chance to really just embrace just the moment of accomplishing something. So I definitely gave me a different perspective on how to look at my goals and just to be okay with adapting if I need to. I'd rather put out something good and also enjoy it than just to put it out, just say I put it out.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Enjoy the process while you're going through it, because
Mm.
I think some of us, what happens is we reach the goal, or we finish the book, or we finish the whatever creative thing that we're working on, and we just raise the bar. We go on to the next thing, and it's like, wait a minute, sit with that, enjoy that a little bit. Do you think that, like, how is that connected to our emotions though? Do you think that we kind of handle our emotions the same way? As like, oh, we just I don't know. Do you get what I'm saying? I don't know if I'm
Yeah,
clear with
like
that.
putting a
Okay.
like putting a timeline on how we navigate our emotions.
Yeah.
100%. I'm a big. I've definitely
Mhm.
done that way too much. Some things take more time, and you have to be able
Mhm.
to embrace it and accept it. And again, it's not really a timeline is asking. So why are you putting yourself on that timeline in the first place? So uh, no, definitely, I think people do that all the time with emotions. They're having a bad day. They just want to give themselves 3 hours when you might need a week.
Mhm.
And it's just really recognizing like what exactly is going on. It's just a constant reflecting. I think is always important for people to kind of keep in mind.
Mhm. Yeah. No, that's good. I'm glad you said that. Like, don't give yourself maybe a timeline. For me, man, I keep telling this story. This is gonna be the last time I tell this daggone story on here. I've been telling this story almost every episode. But I said, the last episode, I said I'm still processing this. So there was a situation that happened when I first moved into my place, which was like in October, and something happened, and I was just like, "Oh my god, I thought I would be over it by now." But I'm like,
Yeah.
clearly, here we are in February when this is being recorded. It's February, and I'm like, I'm still processing this situation. The other
Mm.
During another episode, I was talking to a young lady about it, and she said, "Well, I think you're still processing it because you need to be more compassionate with yourself when you're sharing the story." And I said, "Oh yeah." I said, "Oh." I said, "Oh, okay." She said, "Maybe you need to reflect on why this is impacting you so much." I said, "Oh yeah, like what do I need to reflect on?" She said, "Well, reflect on a time in your childhood." So I swear, she was just like I don't think she was trying to be therapeutic in the middle of our recording, but I was like, damn. So I did, once we got off, I did get like, I stopped and reflected on it, and I said, oh, okay, this is why it's so impactful for me, because my home for me represents security and it represents stability. And so when something goes wrong in my home, that's almost like shaking that foundation of security and stability. And it was that part, and I said, okay, I will have more compassion with myself. One, I was emotional over something going wrong in my home, and
Yeah.
I had received advice, like just encouragement about, well, just trust the process. I was
Yeah.
pissed off with that encouragement because let me be upset, okay?
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, I'm good, I'm straight. But like now when I talk about it, it's like, girl, you can be compassionate towards yourself when you're experiencing some of those difficult emotions, such as
Yeah.
crying, being upset. The maintenance guy done came through. I'm crying with the maintenance guy because the maintenance guy fixed you. Like, it's
Mhm.
okay to be like that. You know, I remember telling a friend, like, I'm not a robot. Like, I'm going to be upset. I'm going to be emotional about some things. I said, but if you're my friend, if you know me, you know that I'm going to overcome that. And so it was just
Yeah.
like, okay, I value, you know, and it also showed me what I value. I value relationships where they just allow me, like, just give me space, right, to be emotional for a little while. And don't set a timeline on me. Like, if I want to be emotional for a week, just let me be that way. Just know I'm gonna
Yeah.
overcome it, you know? And I think that, you know, it's uncomfortable though. Like, emotions are uncomfortable for people. Like, can we, let's talk about that. I know we've been talking about creativity and emotional stability, but how come? Like, how come emotions are so difficult for some people to like experience or even just like witness?
Because you got to be open and vulnerable. I think most people
Mm.
struggle with that. Most people struggle with the idea of accepting. I mean, that's including myself. It's nothing worse than feeling open and being exposed with the things that we're feeling, especially people closest to us. So, from a writer perspective, it's just like, what is it that we are feeling? What is it that we can do to kind of help navigate? And like you kind of mentioned, you know, having a moment where you felt frustrated by somebody expressing, you know, pretty much essentially get over it. It's just, I think we try to find a sense of normalcy in everything. Like, you know, like a typical question, like, oh, how you doing today? Oh, I'm fine.
Mm-hmm.
We 95% of the time always say that, but you know, let's be honest, is everybody feeling fine every day the same way? No. So emotions are just a very open-ended, scary process to like navigate through. And so it's just, you know, it's difficult, but I
Yeah.
think it's a beauty when you really express it and be honest with yourself.
Yeah, no, and I think that's why I value people who just kind of allow for that emotional space, because it's like when you're vulnerable with someone, I feel like the connection just, it gets deeper than just the shallow, like you said, how you doing? I'm fine. Like, that's very shallow. I probably don't have a connection with that person. You know what I mean? And so I
Yeah.
think that, you know, and even if someone's listening to this, just to kind of be mindful in the relationships that you have, because dang, emotions, I feel like they also connect us, right?
Yeah. They
Yeah.
do. They do. They connect us in every way. I think the way to get close to people is through emotions, expressing ourselves, and that's the only way people really can understand people is to be
Mhm.
honest and open in that time. I think any relationship, whether it's personal, intimate, friendship, you learn more when you have those emotional moments. Some sort of, well, not to say conflict, but again, the openness. There's a beauty in it. It's just it's really it's hard to navigate from time to time. But when we actually do it and we be honest and just accept it, then I think that's when we start living a bit more free.
Yeah. Yeah, because then you're not you're not ashamed or you don't feel guilty about it. I think that sometimes those two things can block us. Like, oh, I feel ashamed for my tears, or I feel bad that I'm upset and now everybody, we got to pause for me, or da 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 whatever. I was actually working on a book yesterday, and in it the girl was talking about taking up space. Like, don't feel guilty to take up space. So many people around the world take up space, and it's not always in the positive light. Like people
Yeah.
will take up space just to be kind of an asshole, but understand that sometimes we take up space just because it's normal to, and that's okay. And our emotions are not bad, you know?
No, not
Mm.
bad, but I think it's again, I guess taking a step further, I think people do pretty well with emotions. I think men struggle with expressing themselves a little bit more. And even though I think of like writers in general, depending on your writing style, I think again, it's we are all kind of spilling out our emotions in different ways. It's just we're not
Mm.
maybe not as direct with ourselves. Like I said, my writing is more so about myself and my perspective. So I'm usually more of embracing more of the vulnerability instead of having like a fiction story where I'm kind of utilizing the character, which I would love to do. It's
Mm-hmm.
just I found it more easier for me just to be honest about myself and just be reflective.
Hmm. How come men struggle with expressing their emotions?
You said, how come men?
Mm-hmm. You said you just said men
Oh
struggle
yeah,
a little
yeah.
bit. Let's
Well,
get into it.
yeah, my counseling brain kind of went in. I think
Mm.
some of it is how we were raised.
Yeah.
Some of it is a lot of it is how we were raised and how the things that we've experienced. And sometimes it's just not feeling like we've had a safe space. I know that sometimes when people hear that statement, it's like, well, I do this for such and such, but you have to think of like a collective space. When you usually think of men in particular, when it comes to emotions, you don't equate crying and certain things as a strength in society's eyes. And so when
Mm.
there's a struggle with just trying to figure out and navigating how to open up with that, relatively a tougher thing to do for men. But I think, we're getting more open with that space and process.
Yeah. Oh, were you gonna say something?
Can I have 1 second? I need to open this door. Okay.
Yeah. Sure.
That was my wife.
Oh, okay.
She was trying to, I saw she left the key. I was like,
Oh,
I think she's
okay.
got to come back in.
Got it.
No, I appreciate that.
Okay.
Uh, but yeah, it's just a thing where emotions is tough, and I think again it's just really being honest and open with that. It's something about being open as a guy. It's just it doesn't always sit well. At least
Hmm.
even me still, it's a struggle because you recognize you're not Superman. If that makes sense, you're just like, okay, I'm this person. I have these things. I have these faults and problems, and we just don't want to be exposed like that. Sometimes I feel like.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. All that's understandable. And I also will say a lot of mental health, like, is geared towards women. Even when I was getting ready for this podcast,
Yeah.
I it's about out of the 25 people that said yes and actually booked, I think I got like three guys on here. I'm like, what the fuck is that? Like, what's going on?
We don't
But
really
I,
talk about it. We
yeah.
don't.
I'm like, what? But see, I'm like, look, I'm like, Sierra, if I was a boy, I would be dominating the mental health field because what they're
Oh
not
yeah, no,
men.
I hear it all the time. I hear how I'm essentially a unicorn because it's not a lot of
Mm-hmm.
men in counseling, especially mental health. And again, it's because of the stigmas behind it. Uh, yeah, it's tough to be honest and open and try to be emotionally free for yourself, but then also for other men. So some of the clients I have now, it's like when they are guys, the conversations we have, it's like, man, I just wish more men had the understanding of the experience, and I'm very grateful for the women clients I have as well because I think they come to me sometimes just to have a different perspective, especially if they are struggling maybe with something with childhood or maybe with their partner. Sometimes I think a male perspective is good because we don't really get that in any space, especially with like really open, honest, and emotional conversations. Like even my therapist is a woman, and she's great, and she gives me a perspective on things. But sometimes I'm like, dang, if I had a male therapist when I was younger, especially
Mm-hmm.
navigating some hardships that maybe I don't want to talk to my mom about growing up, it just gives you a different perspective. So yeah, I always encourage men. I'm actually surprised there wasn't a lot more. I saw it and I was like, I feel like this is a great space to get into, especially if you are a writer. to open up and talk about those things. So again, I thank you for opening it up, because some people don't open it up for men in this space, especially like just the writing
Mm.
piece. Sometimes, like I've seen threads where it's like, oh, I'm just looking for women only, and I'm like, I think this is a great conversation
Yeah,
for men to get into. So I don't take no offense to it, because I get it. It's just the stigma behind men and opening up. It's not a thing
that's not a
always.
thing. Well, dang. Well, I'm gonna have to launch a specific podcast just for the men, just for the brothers specifically, bruh. Hit me up. That might be the next season. Let's talk men and mental health for the
Yeah.
brown skinned brothers. Yeah, that might shoot. We might need to do that because it's so
Yeah.
important. You know, a couple years ago, I was like going to the barber shop and like getting like I was looking like you almost, just getting my hair real, real short, right? Yeah, it was
Yeah.
crazy. I don't know. But being in the barber shop, just listening to the guys talk, it was a whole different perspective on a lot of things. I mean, I'm like,
Yeah.
we passing around little henny shots, whatever. Like we passing around
Yeah.
drinks and just talking. And once the guys get to drinking, they just get real comfortable with each other. And it's like
Yeah.
just to be a fly. I would shoot. I would, sometimes I would. Oh, Aurelia, Miss Wayne, what do you think? Hey, my name's Bennett. I'm not in it. I'm just here to listen and
Yeah.
take
Listen.
notes. Yeah, and that would be so interesting. And I'm like, oh, this is where you guys have therapy. Some stuff was good. And I could see a lot of stuff like, dang, that's kind of toxic, but okay, that's in every
Yeah.
space. But I thought, wow, this is cool. Do you think like that's kind of how it is though in some communities? Like, I know even as a woman, I could go to the hair salon right
Oh
now
yeah.
and it would be something similar, just like having a community to talk things out in
Yeah.
another perspective.
Yeah. We don't
It,
really.
go ahead.
Sorry, the communities are important. That's what I was gonna say. So, like, and part of me is like, I would love to go to that barbershop just to like be involved, because it's like a mix of things. I don't think there's nothing wrong with drinking, but I think
Mm,
when you have to utilize that to
mm,
open up, it's kind of like, it kind of, that's just a Pandora's box. That's kind of negative, because it's sometimes, depending on the
yeah.
person, it can be viewed as like a coping mechanism. I only open up when I put this in my body, or if I smoke
Mm,
this, right? And again, if that's what it works, but it's just like we gotta be able to be comfortable with just our sober mind and thoughts, and not having to alter to express ourselves.
yeah.
It's been a while since I've been in a barbershop where there's been a whole bunch of people sitting, just because
Mm,
barbershops have changed. But no, that used to be our safe
mm,
space growing up, where
mm,
we would sit and I would hear my dad talk to his boys, and they're talking about their marriage problems and stuff like that. But sometimes
mm,
I used to ask my dad, I'm like, why don't they ever talk about this with their wives, right? Or
mm,
maybe go to a counselor. Like, these were things I used to think early. Like, these are, especially if you've heard the combos, they can be very intense. I
mm,
can imagine at a hair salon, it's very intense,
mm.
where some people end up crying, and it's like you've been
Yeah.
holding this in. And so again, it's, while a safe space is always given, it's also still important to be open to the people closest to us as well,
Mm,
because they still have no idea. Like, yeah, I can open up to my boys, but if I'm having problems at home, and the person at home has no idea, how does anything really get fixed? It doesn't. Right? How do I have somebody kind of give me a different angle? Because your boys can be biased, just like, girlfriends can be biased. Where it's like, oh,
mhm.
girl, you can leave him, or whatever the
Right.
situation is.
Mhm.
Sometimes there is no objectivity in that. Instead of saying, hey, I am hurting because of this, this, and this. Somebody help me fix this. But most people, when you're in those spaces, you're not talking about how to fix it. You're just kind of
Right.
complaining about it, and you're not really getting a real solution. It's not really a healthy conversation sometimes. That's why I would love to
Mhm.
see what that looks like.
Mhm.
Because the amount of people that talk about all the negative things that bother them is great. And just like when I talk to my clients, all right, we got the bad stuff out the way. Now, how do we find solutions to work these things through? Because, therapy or mental health, you don't really have a healing process per se. Like, I don't like, healing is it's a thing, but you don't go to therapy to heal. In my
Mm.
opinion, because there's always going to be a different problem that kind of comes up. I just think you go to therapy to be aware of the traumas that you may be facing, and you find different tools to navigate them better. Because I think of healing, I think of complete. Like when people say I'm healed, it's like, life still happens. There's going to be another wound that kind of maybe opens up again. So just find different ways.
That's interesting. You're the first person who said therapy is not for healing. I thought therapy was for healing something.
I also know that I can say things that make absolutely no sense, but it makes
Okay.
sense to me. It is like, okay, so I'm gonna sound like I'm contradicting. It should not just be the only objective.
Okay.
Because it's not, again, to me, healing sounds like complete. I am
Mm,
healed, right? But there's
mhm,
probably still more grief you're going to experience, more heartbreak, more heart loss, and like things like that. So your those wounds are still going to open back up. Like
mhm.
that's what I mean by that. It's just you have a new foundation of how to navigate those things better.
Yeah. One of the things that's coming up for me is an author that I interviewed. This was years ago. Dr. Betty Wright. I always shout her out. Shout out to her. She said
Mm.
healing for her is just having better days. She said,
Yep.
"What does your better day? What does your better day look like? Okay, when you get there, boom, okay." And so for me, I'm like, okay, on my healing journey, like you said, I feel like this is going to be forever. But I
Yeah.
look back at where I was last year, okay, doing the reflecting, and I'm like, am I having better days than last year? Yeah. Am I in a better place than last year? Yeah. And it's like, okay, I've grown. I would kind of put those two together. Healing and growth kind of to me are like they're like cousins. They hold hands and just kind of work together. And I'm like, okay, I've grown a lot. I've healed in some areas. I'm having better days in some areas. And in other areas, maybe not so much, but I'm aware of that and I'm okay. It's like
Yeah.
I can only work on one thing at one time. But
Yeah.
I think that just, the work that we do on ourselves, I mean, I know the work that I've done on myself has not only improved my life, but it's also improved others. And I think that this podcast, I've been saying this is a huge, like, testament of the growth that I've had because man, for the longest I was just doing author interviews just cuz that was safe. I could get on here, ask a few questions about books and be done, but it was so exhausting for me. And I said, "You know what? I'm going to start just doing author interviews just written." But I like to talk to people. I like these connections. I like having conversations. I said, "Well, what else can I talk about?" I've always been
Mhm.
talking about mental health for a while. And so it's just naturally, okay, let's talk about mental health. But I wanted to do it in a way that also honored like my creativity. So that's why we're here talking about emotional stability and creativity. And
Yeah.
I will say in that aspect, I'm having a better time. I'm having better days. I'm healing because I think at the also I would just be doing author interviews just because maybe there was this expectation of I am an author and I do help authors publish
Hmm.
books like, oh, I gotta
Hmm.
have a podcast and it has to be
Hmm.
author interviews. And
Hmm.
it doesn't matter if my creativity is involved. I mean, it would be there would be little things that I could get creative with, but I was burnt out and
Yep.
I couldn't ignore that no more. It was just
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I'm
there
not
you
having
go.
a good time with this. Some authors are really boring. I'm really not into their book.
Yeah.
And it just
Hey, be honest here. That's okay.
so it was like, okay, I know we kind of got off the questions, but for me, that was my creative
No,
burnout,
sure.
right? Okay, let's
Yeah.
that was my creative burnout. And it was like I had to shift. Like there were still some key core pieces, right? Obviously, when you're doing a podcast, there's some core pieces of it. But just shifting the topics that really helped me. Like I feel so energized after I get done with these podcasts. Like when I get done, I have one more after we record this one. I have one more to do. And then I got it's Saturday. I got some other things I need to do. But I know that I will have the energy to go and do it. Had this been an author interview, what? I'm taking a nap. I'm taking a nap after the author interview. I'm tired. Like ain't nothing getting
Yeah.
done till Saturday night, right? And so that's the
Right.
difference. But how about for you? Like, have you experienced creative burnout and then how did you handle it?
Several times. Yeah, similar to you. Like I said, I have my own podcast called Knowing is Knowing, and I've I guess been doing podcasts for years. And yeah, I think you do get burnt out. I was burnt out in October.
Mm,
Uh, and I wasn't doing interviews at that time. So I've done a lot of interviews, but I've also had different variations of different podcasts. Like each podcast to me has kind of been like an album, I feel like, of my life. I think to take in that space. I think it's like my fourth one. But yeah, I got to a point where I'm like, I'm kind of tired of kind of fit in this mold. You said something I think that was really important. It's like you feel like you have to interview authors
mm,
because of what you do,
mm,
and I think that sometimes we box our own self in because of the identity that we are labeled as. So with
mm,
this being my first, might be my first or second interview where I've talked about my writing.
mm,
It's a little unique because me being an author is kind of like far fetched. I honestly don't really talk about it for real. Uh, unless somebody brings it up because I just never want to be like, oh, I'm just an author.
mm,
I kind of go back to like your unlimited mindset. It's just something that I have enjoyed doing, and hopefully, maybe one day that becomes like the forefront of what I do. It's just
mm,
right now it's not. So it's really embracing what it looks like and how I can navigate through that. But no, creative burnout, man, all the time. That's what I mean. Is you gotta gauge where you're at. You gotta gauge. How important something is to you. Because
mm,
a lot of times, what I'm learning about burnout, and this is going to sound very crazy, burnout isn't necessarily a real thing. It's real as far as like what we feel, but
mm,
I think to be creative is always be adaptable. I think we get
mm,
burnt out from the creative aspect because we're tired of doing that particular thing. Uh, I think if you're creative, you always have something you can do differently. So
mm,
many different ideas you can do. I just think we get burnt out when we're tired of doing that same thing because our mind just wants to do something else, but we're still trying to fight it. We're trying to fit the niche of what we think is important.
mm.
So no, I once I learned that and accept that, I did. Similar to you, was interviewing. I was doing 3 or 4 back to back. And I still
Wow.
got a good handful I haven't even put out yet. Cause I hit a point where I'm like, I don't even want to do this no more right now. And like, I felt bad, but I'm also like, I mean, we did it and I'm gonna still honor and put it out, but I'm gonna shift
Mm,
back to focusing on what I would like to discuss, and that's for myself. Uh, I don't owe people anything. Like even like these interviews, like you interview right now, one day it can be in, June, it's scheduled to come out. You're like, you know what? I'm just not in the space for it. I can't be offended by that because I understand
mm,
how creative juices work. Your mind just goes to the next thing, and that's okay. Uh,
yeah.
so just navigating and being adaptable is the best way I would say. It's always the thing.
Yeah. That's good. That's good because I always used to feel so bad about just being burnt out about something. Like, dang,
Yeah.
I felt so horrible. Like, man, I feel like I should be doing author interviews, but it just got down to, you know what? Dealing with that shame and that guilt. Like, why do I feel this way? Oh, I feel guilty because this is what I've been doing. This is what, I was kind of known for. I remember I had someone ask me, well, Miss Wynn, when are you coming back with author interviews? And man, I must have made the ugliest face talking to they knew off the bat. They're like, dang, what's going on with the author interviews? I said, dog, don't even ask me about the author interviews. I said, I
Like
don't
I don't
feel
want to
like
talk about
it.
it.
Like,
Yeah.
they're like, but that's what you do. It's what I did. And it just
Did.
had to be like,
Yeah.
and I led this person down and they're just like, okay, it's what you did. So what's next? And so it was like through that conversation came this podcast. And it was like, okay, even earlier today, I was like, okay, thinking about like my schedule. When am I going to put everything out? And I know myself, like you said, I'm like, let me capitalize on this feeling good energy because it might be different a month from now. So I'm like, let me make sure. I'm like, I really when I started this, I set
Yeah.
some goals in mind. I said I really want to make sure I honor this. I want to put it out. My own personal goal. I say, I do want these conversations to be impactful. Like I really want people to leave feeling better than they came. Or at least leave with some more knowledge or like you said, a different perspective at the end of the day. But I said, for my own personal gain, and this was what I was kind of working on earlier today, is I'm trying to grow my YouTube channel. I'm trying to get monetized on YouTube. So I'm like, I know I got to follow through and put this stuff out and really do well. And so I said, that's my
Yeah.
intention. But I also know that my creative energy, it only is going to go so far. So I'm like, how can we maximize this time? Because these don't drop until April. And so I'm like, how can
Yeah.
I maximize this time? Because no telling what's going to be happening in April. I don't want to, like, I'm really good for waiting until the last minute only because I know that I could do it. Like, I could be a last minute person and still succeed. I've been doing that. I could be good at it, but only for so long.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, that's where I'm at with that. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I get that. Again, I would even, even with your deadline, your goal deadline, I would, always just openly challenge to be okay to adapt. If you feel like that you need to push them out earlier so you can focus on something else, then I would
Yeah.
do that because it's a real thing where you're like, I don't even want to do this no more.
Yeah.
It really
Mm-hmm.
is. So, and then also think it kind of helps maybe to navigate the guilt part too. It's like, okay, I know I'm not gonna probably want to do this, so let me just go ahead and knock
Yeah.
these out and put them out, and then everybody feels good, everybody's happy. I can focus on uh, what I would like to do. Yeah, so I get
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Nice. So do you think, like, what would that be called? Is that like mindfulness, or what is mindfulness, and how do you integrate that with other emotional health practices in the creative
Yeah.
process?
Uh, Mindfulness, I think for me, I've had to really work on this. Like when I tell you this past week alone, I've had to do like some real reflecting.
Mm,
Uh, like real reflecting just with self. Like mindfulness, I think is, it's just being aware of all the options around you.
mm,
I've always had a great ability to be mindful, but I've also had a better ability to be mindful for others over myself.
mm,
So that was like the real gut punch. Like, what about you, man? Like you're trying to, pour into all these different things, and especially when you do something like I do, where your job is literally a service, like you're serving other people and their problems,
mm,
and then you're trying to show up and be a good partner or whatever. But the mindfulness is also recognizing that it's okay to be selfish in your whatever you're controlling. So like this is your stuff. Uh, you have to be mindful of what's important to you.
mm,
As people, we have to just be grateful for the opportunity to be able to speak, but we're not owed anything. This isn't a binding contract. There's no
right.
deadline. Uh, in a joking sense, all I ask is that, you never do put it out, just give it to me so I can just have it with my own clips. But no, it's one of those things where being mindful, I think, is you're just aware of everything, but I think really being mindful with yourself and what's important. I think we can be overly mindful of others. Again, going back to that shame and guilt. We feel bad for disappointing other people, and
Mm,
we have unconscious expectations of what that looks like. And again, something it smacked me in the face. If I lower my expectations of others and just accept what I do, I may am not as frustrated when different things don't happen how I want it to happen. Maybe I
mm,
don't get as burnt out. Maybe I don't feel as guilty. Uh, and just being mindful of what's important. And so, like you said, right now it sounds like your YouTube channel is the most important thing. It's just
mm,
like, honoring that. A lot of us don't really honor ourselves. We don't. That's why I
mm.
think the emotional space is really important to really open up and be mindful with. I think a lot of us are people pleasers. We don't like
Yeah.
we don't like disappointing people. And it
Mm,
usually stems from childhood or something like that. But
mm.
we do have to get better with being a little selfish uh with what we can't control. Again, I think service is great, but being mindful of what's important to us is just as important.
Yeah. And especially as a creative person, and that's something that I had to come to the conclusion of last year is I'm like, hold up, I do publish books, but I also write books. And I was getting really frustrated.
Yeah.
Like, hold on, I gotta give myself time to write
Mhm.
myself. Like I don't want to just be known as a publisher. I also don't want to just be known as an author. Like I want to be known for talking about mental wellness. I want to be known for talking about spirituality and mental health and creativity and all those things. So it was like I had to shift. Like, oh, I because this is important for me, I have to start putting it, like, make it a priority. Now
Yeah.
I do make client work a priority, but it's like I even limit that and I give myself more time to work on projects. Whereas last year, well, I could get a project done. I get it done in 3 days if I'm really like focused. Which now I'm like,
Yeah.
no, I need 30 days. I'm telling my clients right now, like, I need 30 days. Even that's kind of pushing it. If we give me 45 days, 60 days, that's a sweet spot. We can get your book done and out and ready to be published.
So you
But
write them? I'm sorry, you write the books? No, you don't?
no. Okay, so I will share what I do as a publisher. So when books get to me, they've already been written and they've already been edited, and I can help with everything else, from designing the book cover to formatting it to either uploading it to different platforms like Amazon or Lulu or Ingram Sparks for the authors. I
Okay.
handle all
Yeah,
of
yeah.
that.
Okay.
And so usually my clients, they just like to write and they say, Miss Wynn, I'm done. It's already been looked at by an editor. Boom, your turn.
Do the rest.
And I do the rest. And I
Do
love it.
the
I said,
rest.
I'm just a publisher. So when we're talking about marketing, I do very minimal marketing. I'll share it, I'll talk about it, but that's the same thing when you're working with a traditional publisher. You still are going to be responsible for marketing your book. And but I will say the people that I've seen be successful as authors are more than just an author. They do more than just write books. I have a lady right now. She sells, I want to say, 50 books per speaking engagement, and so her main thing is she's a speaker. She's out sharing her story. Um, about how she's overcome child abuse. And her main thing is she talks about resilience and just, how do you overcome adversities and things like that. And I want to say she does like 10 to 20 speaking engagements a year. So she's selling out 50 to 100 books each speaking engagement. And I'm just like, maybe you don't have to be a speaker, but you do have to be visible in
Oh
some
yeah.
aspect. Like if you're an
Yeah.
author and you're just real shy, real timid, you don't want to be seen, boy, your book is not going to sell. You have to be visible.
Yeah, I tell my friends this all the time, especially like who are creators. I'm like, the days of trying to be like this mystique, like hidden behind the woods type person, it's not it,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't work. One, it's just there's too many talented people and visibility is what sells. So if you don't have that, there's just nothing you can do. No, but yeah, you gotta be visible at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day. That's all that matters. Because again, I mean, 50 to 100 books of engagement. I need to talk to them because that's great. They're doing
Yeah.
quite well in that space. So good for them.
Yeah, yeah. No, she works with a speaking agency, and so that's part of her contract with working with other. Like when she goes to places, not only is she getting paid to speak, but she's also bringing her books with her as a part of her contract.
No, I
Um,
love that.
yeah, and so that's just for people interested in sharing your creativity. Know that being visible is key. And so,
Yeah.
anyways, this has been a wonderful and meaningful conversation.
Thank you.
As we wrap it up, is there anything else that you would like to share?
Appreciate the opportunity as always. I don't like to pre-announce things. I do have a book that I'm working on. I have two that I'm working on, so definitely be in contact with you and love any insight. I've done the self-publishing process, but I can always use some
Mhm.
expertise. So no, thank you as always. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and hopefully, people got something out of this, whether it was from the
Mhm.
writing side or mental health. Either way, I'm always grateful. So thank you.
Absolutely.
That's it for today's check in. If this episode resonated with you, share it with a friend, hit that subscribe or follow button, and let's keep growing together. Hey, and if you're tuning in on YouTube, drop your after emoji in the comments and tell me what shifted for you. I'll see you next time on Miss Win Checking In, where creativity is a pathway to wellness.